Today I'm going to be doing Buck Rogers' Battle for the 25th Century game from TSR in 1988. It has been described as maybe a more complex Risk with, orbital, motions, that sort of thing. I think it's got a little bit of depth to it because it's got some advanced rules. I'll check it out. It's got production, it's different types of forces. There's some randomness, strategy, of course, motion of planets. So it should be interesting. We'll give it a try. First of all, the box, it's a very large game. It's 21 by 12 by about 3 inches. Mine's a little bit worn on the edges, but it's mostly complete. It's missing a couple markers, but I was fortunate to get this at a good price, it's pretty hard to find out there, so I was happy about that. And the art, honestly, doesn't quite work for me, but to me it's got a combination of kind of realism and then more kind of simplistic designs. So there's a little bit of contrast there. Colors don't quite work for me, but it might work for some. I like the art on the back. The characters especially. Very well done. Contents. So we're on 360 playing pieces, so you'll see that's why it's such a big box. The fate of the solar system is in your hands. It is the 25th century, a fierce war of colonization and conquest has thrown the inner planets of our solar system into disarray. Warships stream across the blackness of space, cutting swaths of destruction from Mercury to the asteroid belt. While humans and genies, genetically engineered warriors, battle for the crater-pocked surfaces of planets and their moons, powerful leaders fight to turn the tide of battle. Some, like Buck Rogers, Wilma Deering, and Dakur, seek to free the solar system from those bent on conquest. Then there are the would-be conquerors, Killer Kane and Ardala. And on the asteroids are the space pirates, led by Black Barney. In Buck Rogers' Battle for the 25th Century, you take the role of one of these leaders. You create and command the space armadas and armies, make alliances and break them. You fight the battle to free or enslave the inner planets. What does the future hold? Only you can decide. As far as the components, there's 2 rule books. They're both 16 pages, black and white. So basic game rules. It's nice that they're kind of stand a little bit themselves. And then there's advanced optional games rules and a sample turn. So it's nice that they have an example turn. And like I said, the game is mostly complete that I got. Nothing that I can't manage. So there's 6 turn cards, and I'm missing the 2, but it's not a big deal. On one side, the combat results, and they're all the same on the other side. Just 1 through 6 for the turn markers. I'll just print out on some cardstock the combat result, and then put a similar font number in the back to make the 2, so it's not a big deal. And then the leader cards, 6 of them. Wilma Deering, Blockade Runner. Fighters, battlers, and transports with Wilma are immune to pass-through fire, retreat fire, and killer satellites, so they're special attributes. Of course, Buck Rogers, the rocket jockey. Fighters with Buck destroy an enemy unit on a roll of 4 or more. Killer Kane, evil sneak. Units with Kane get 1 free attack before combat begins. Opponents get no counterattack. This power is used before killer satellite attacks. Ardala, inside traitor. Ardala can steal 2 units from other players or take control of another player's leader for 1 turn. Dakur, mechanical genius. Spaceships with who move to extra zones. Black Barney, genetic pirate. Barney captures ships defeated in combat. Then there's territorial zone cards. 42 of these. Here's some examples. Used to determine which territorial zones you control at the end of the game. Each card shows a game board with a single territorial zone highlighted, for instance here. Before the game begins, each player is dealt 6 territorial zone cards and places one of its control markers in each territorial zone highlighted in its card. See, different locations are. And remember, like at games, I definitely give credit for, if they're advanced for their time. In 1988, so it's like, around 300 of these miniatures characters, which is really quite impressive, and they're all very well done. They're like a nice sturdy plastic, formed out really well. And there comes with these boxes with like styrofoam tray, 5 10-sided dice. Of course, there is randomness involved. There's uncertainty in reality, so I kind of like a little bit of randomness in the game. And there's 45 of these white chips. They're like mini poker chips. 5 of the red. So the game is up to 6 players, or factions we'll call them. Each has 8 transport markers shown here, and they're moderate thickness. 2 are marked transport 1 here, for instance, and 2 are marked transport 2, 2 are marked transport 3, and 2 transport 4. Transport is placed on board, put a transport marker under it, then place the matching marker off the board. This makes it easy to tell which units are aboard each transport. Control markers, shown here, and on one side it has a symbol of the area or planet, and the other side it shows production. They signify ownership of a territorial zone. Placed on the zone at the end of the combat phase, in which you take control of the zone with any piece. Any enemy unit moving into the zone containing nothing but a control marker automatically takes over that zone. So each faction has 23. On one side it's, like I said, it's production. It's used to show that the faction marker has spent 1 turn producing a unit that takes 2 turns to manufacture. And then these planet markers. So there's 1 planet marker for each planet and asteroid in the solar system. The planets Earth, Venus, Mercury, Mars. Then the asteroids Aurora, Hygiea, Juno, Ceres, Vesta, Fortuna, Paula, Psyche, and Thule. Each planet's got a sun side and a crescent moon side, so you can keep track of the planetary movement. So a lot of very well done molded plastic miniatures. They don't have any excess material or flashing around them. Leader characters, there are 6 of them. Buck Rogers, Wilma Deering, Killer Kane, Ardala, Black Barney, and Doc Hoyer. And then there's fighting units here, troopers, and again each color. Full-blooded humans, workhorses of the army, can be loaded on transports, move from planet to planet. By themselves they move 1 territorial zone per turn. Genies, which are genetically engineered humans. Genies are designed to fight only on a particular planet and can leave that planet even on transports. This makes genies primarily defensive fighters, but they're genetically modified to be really good fighters. And there's 3 different classes of ships for each. Transports move 4 zones per turn, any combination of territorial zones, orbit zones, and or space zones. They can carry up to 5 troopers or 1 factory. Factories inside transports can produce new units. Transports have minimal fighting capabilities, so it's a good idea to escort them. In combat, a transport can't be attacked until all other friendly units in the zone are destroyed. If a transport is destroyed, all units within it are destroyed. Fighters, they can move up to 4 space, orbit, or territorial zones. And then battlers, which kind of look like birds of prey in the Star Trek universe. The battler is a 25th century battleship, superior in combat to fighters, and can bomb planetary surfaces from adjacent orbit zones. In the basic game, move up to 4 orbit or space zones per turn. Unlike fighters and transports, they can never land on territorial zones or asteroids. Once per turn, battlers get a special bombing attack, allowing them to destroy units in territorial zone while they remain safe in near orbit. In order to bomb a battler, must be in the near orbit zone of a planetary display. The player declares his target. Any trooper, fighter, transporter, factory in one that planetary display's territorial zones rolls a die, and on a 7 or higher, the target is immediately removed from the board without getting a counterattack. Killer satellites, shown here. Said ability must control all the planet and tie up a factory for 2 turns. Killer satellites produce strong planetary defenses, can only be deployed in the near orbit zones of planetary displays or in the orbit zones of asteroids. Killer satellites. Once deployed, killer satellites can't move, but enemy ships entering the near orbit zone are frozen in space until a combat phase. Before any other combat takes place, the killer satellites get 1 free shot at every enemy ship in the near orbit zone, and ships killed at this time removed from the board without getting counterattack. No more than 1 killer satellite can be built in any planetary display except Earth Moon. Both the Earth and its moon can support a killer satellite. And then factories, used to produce new flying pieces as the game goes on. Capable of producing the unit types described: 2 troopers per turn, 2 genies per turn, 1 fighter per turn, 1 transport per turn, 1 killer satellite every 2 turns, 1 battler every 2 turns, 1 factory every 2 turns. Factories can only be placed in territorial zones. Once placed, factories can only be moved aboard transports. They have no combat ability at all. And the red and white chips are basically a means of tracking multiple stacked units. For instance, if you have several fighting units, you say that, okay, you have 3 on there to count for 3 of them. Game board, very large, 21 by 36. It's board mounted, folds into 3 sections here. So it's got 2 main displays. One is the solar system display. Represents an overhead view of the planets and asteroids as they revolve around the sun. The planets and asteroids are color-coded: yellow for Mercury, green for Venus, blue for Earth, red for Mars, and gray for asteroids. The orbits of planets are shown in the solar system in matching colors. Planets are connected to one another by white lines. Spaceships travel between planets along these lines. The dots on the solar system display are used to measure how far a planet or spaceship moves. These dots are called space zones. Planetary displays around the map represent planets and asteroids themselves. The surface of each planet is divided into several small areas called territorial zones, here for instance. Some of the planets have moons and man-made satellites. Earth, for instance, has L4 and L5 colonies. Mercury's Halo and Mars Boss, and Mars is Deimos. And then there's the moon, of course. Some of these are, obviously more man-made than, natural bodies. These are considered territorial zones. The space around each planet is divided into a near orbit zone and a far orbit zone. The boards of each planet's far and near orbit zone are color-coded to match the orbits on the solar system display. So near orbit and far orbit, for instance. Asteroids have only one orbit zone, which sometimes work like a near orbit zone, and other times work as a far orbit zone. So the credits: original game design, Jeff Grubb; rules development, Flint Dill; rules writing, Warren Inspector, Stephen Winter; editing, Warren Inspector; graphic design, Jeff Butler; Diesel, Stephanie Tabot; keylining, Stephanie Tabot, Sue Myers. First of all, going through the rules for the basic game. To win, you must accomplish one of the following goals: control 15 territorial zones at the end of any turn, control the last leader character on the board, convince all the other players to surrender by pointing out the futility of their position, control the highest number of territorial zones at the end of the turn in which Earth returns to its starting zone, completing 1 revolution around the sun. And you can't begin the game with more than 6 pieces in any zone. There's no limit to the number of pieces in zones after setup. Turns in Buck Rogers, divided into 4 steps called phases. These are turn setup, movement, combat, and building. Then turn setup, planetary movement, move the planets in the solar system's play. Slide each planet marker 1 space zone counter clockwise in its coded orbit, and then flip the marker over. Order of movement: the order in which players move changes every turn, depending upon the rolled die. If the roll is even, play goes clockwise. If it's odd, goes counterclockwise. Each player moves in the order determined. You can move as many or few pieces as you want, a distance up to each player's movement limits. Leader characters move up to 4 space, orbit, or territorial zones per turn. They can never end movement alone in a zone containing enemy units. Fighters and transports can also move in territorial zones. Battlers can never enter territorial zones. All ships can move from near orbit to far orbit, and from far orbit onto the solar system display. Since asteroids contain only 1 orbit zone, circle next to the asteroid, players move directly from the asteroid to orbit, and then onto the planet marker representing the asteroid on the solar system display. The transport can carry 1 factor or up to 5 troopers. Loading and unloading are free and can be done at any time during the transport's move. A trooper can move before loading onto a transport, but not after unloading. Unloaded troopers can fight, and unloaded factories can produce immediately. A factory cannot be transported if it is halfway finished producing a unit requiring 2 turns to build. All pieces must stop upon entering a territorial zone containing enemy units. Ships moving through orbit or space zones containing enemy ships can always continue moving. Ships belonging to 2 or more players can even share orbit and space zones. Territorial zones can never be occupied by units belonging to more than 1 player at the end of a turn. Space elevator. This Mars territorial zone is unique in that it is adjacent to 3 different types of zones: the Pavanas territorial zone, the Mars near orbit zone, and the Mars far orbit zone. Combat: whenever opposing units in the movement phase in the same zone, combat may result. Combat is mandatory in territorial zones but optional in space and orbit zones. Combat is resolved from the center of the solar system toward the outer edge, beginning with the planet Mercury. Follow steps outlined below. Killer satellites get all of their free attacks. Battlers in orbit bound surface. Resolve any battles on territorial zones. Resolve any battles in near and far orbit zones. Resolve any battles taking place in space zones along the planet's orbital path. When all battles on and around Mercury are finished, continue with battles in Venus, Earth, Mars, and the asteroids. A battle is fought in rounds. Each round, each piece in battle, except leaders, gets to attack once. To attack, follow these steps, with the player move first. Announce which of your pieces is attacking and which of your opponent's piece is being attacked. You attack any enemy piece, except an escort or transport, including a piece that was attacked already but missed. Check the combat results table for your hit number. If the number rolled is equal to or higher than your hit number, the target is hit and destroyed. If you have a leader present in battle, add 2 to all of your die rolls. If the target was hit, set it by the battle line. Typical indicator must be removed at the end of the round. Select another of your pieces that hasn't attacked yet and repeat the steps. All your pieces have attacked, or all the enemy pieces have been hit. Your part of the combat is over. Now your opponent gets to repeat the process for all his pieces in battle, including those that were hit, so it's simultaneous. Both sides still have pieces in the zone. Now the combat round may begin. Combat is mandatory in territorial zones. You have to keep fighting until one player or neither player has units in the zone. In orbit space zones, the battle can be called off at the end of any combat round if both players agree. If combat took place in the territorial zone, the victor places one of his control markers in the zone to indicate it's now his. Rendering forces inert. If at any time leader is your sole remaining unit in containing forces, your forces are immediately inert. Your leader is removed from the board, and you lose the rest of your current turn and your next turn. You can't move, initiate combat, or build new units until you've missed a turn. You can fight if attacked, however. After you miss a turn, you're forced to return to normal, but your leader is out of the game for good. Factory sabotage. If all of your pieces are eliminated from a territorial zone containing a factory, the factory falls into the hands of the opposing player. To prevent this, roll 1 die to sabotage your own factory. If roll a 7 or higher, the factory is removed from the board. When the battle is completed, the building phase begins. This phase, players of factories can build new units. Turn order, players declare what type of unit each of their factories to build. Place all units produced on the board. New factories are placed in any territorial zone. You control the adjacent to the factory producing it. If a factory cannot produce anything in the turn is completed. Battlers and killer satellites can occupy territorial zones, so they are always placed in the near orbit zone nearest the factory that produced them. If the factory changes hands, any in production units become the property of the new owner. The factory is destroyed, sabotaged, or dismantled. The production units are destroyed as well. One killer satellite can be built in any near orbit zone, including that of the moon. If 2 conditions are met. First, the zone must be free of enemy units when construction begins. You can deploy the satellite even if enemy units are present. Second, the player building killer satellite must control all the territorial zones on the planet adjacent to the near orbit. The thriving market exists in the 21st century. This allows a player with no factories to acquire a single trooper or fighter building phase. Factory can be acquired through the black market by waiting 2 turns. Only troopers, fighters, and factories can be acquired through the black market, and only players with no factories can use this way. So looking at the advanced game rules. First, winning the advanced game. Victory conditions are changed from basic game. In the advanced game, leaders are never permanently eliminated. When a leader is the last piece in a zone containing enemy units, the leader is removed from play for 2 full turns, after which time the player who wins the leader can return him or her to the game anywhere on the board. To win the advanced game by eliminating leaders, the player must get rid of every leader on the board within 2 turns. And then leader advantages are changed. So in place of the +2 bonus base game leaders give to all free units in the zone, leaders have special abilities which are shown on their cards and which I discussed earlier. Turn around and setup. Each player selects one of the 6 turn cards at random. Spaceship movement. Ships move at varying rates of speed. Fighters 5 zones per turn. Battlers 4. Transports 3. Combat. Pass-through fire. Special kind of attack which takes place during the movement phase of the turn. Takes 2 forms. The first form is a pass-through fire. Occurs only in orbit and space zones. It is never mandatory. This form of pass-through fire happens when a player moves a ship through a zone occupied by another player's units. All units belonging to the player who already occupied the zone get a free shot at the moving units as they leave the zone. The moving player doesn't get to return fire. The second form of pass-through fire can occur anywhere on the board. It happens when a player with a low turn card number moves into and stops in a zone already occupied by units belonging to a player with a higher turn order card number. Since movement takes place in turn card order, the player with a higher number has the opportunity to move out before the combat phase begins. In an advanced game, the second player can still move out, but there's a risk. Each unit the first player moved into the zone gets a shot at each unit the second player moves out. The second player doesn't get a counterattack. In advanced game, control markers take part in combat just like regular units. All friendly units in a zone must be committed to combat before a control marker can fight. Similarly, all units belong to the player who controls the zone must be targeted before an enemy can attack a control marker. Control markers must be destroyed in order to take control of the zone away from another player. Then there's different combat results table, which includes the control markers. Then rendering forces inert. After missing 2 turns, the leader playing piece is returned to the board. The rest of the player's forces are still out for just 1 turn. Commando operations. A successful commando raid destroys a factory. To mount such a raid against an enemy factory, you must have troopers or genies in the factory's territorial zone. Before the first round of combat begins in that display, you, as the player raiding the factory, announce that you're mounting a commando operation. Set aside as many troopers and genies as you want to allocate to the raid. These units can attempt to destroy the factory round after round until they succeed or are destroyed by enemy forces in the zone. Commandos can be targeted by enemy units in the zone, but they can't counterattack. Units in the factory zone, but not assigned to commando operations, fight normally. During the combat round, the player who owns the factory can attack either the commandos or the units defending them. After this normal combat is complete, any commandos who survive can try to destroy the factory. The player who controls the commandos rolls 1 die for each survivor. On a roll of 6 or higher, the factory is removed from the board. Units assigned to commando operations can't do anything else in a turn. Escape. A player who faces overwhelming odds can choose to surrender or retreat. Surrender. You can only surrender to a foe at the start of any combat round. The opposing player accepts. Your forces are removed from the board, replaced by identical units belonging to the other player. Retreat. At the end of any combat round, after all losses have been removed from the board, you can try to leave the zone. The player with the lowest turn card number gets to retreat first. Retreating units can move 1 zone away from the combat zone. Building. Factory limitations. In the advanced game, factory limits are Mercury, 4 factories total, no more than 2 on the planet surface. Venus, 4 factories. Earth, Moon, 9 factories total, no more than 5 on Earth, no more than 2 on the Moon. Mars, 5 factories total. Asteroids, 1 factory per asteroid. Combining factory production in the events game, 2 factories in adjacent territorial zones can combine their output, producing a battler, Gauss-Atterite, or another factory at a single turn. The asteroids are considered adjacent for production purposes only. And then there's the optional game rules. So under the optional games rules, control of individual territorial zones is unchanged. Control of a planetary display is a matter of controlling it with a simple majority of the zones in it, though. Then alternate scenarios. Gross displays of power. In this scenario, you win by controlling 3 planetary displays. Or the battle for Earth and Mars. No one can place pieces on Earth, Moon, or Mars planetary displays. The first player to control both. The Earth, Moon, and Mars planetary display wins the game, or someplace to call home. At random, take 1 territorial zone card for each planetary display. Deal each player 1 card. That player then controls all the zones in that planetary display. The first player to take control of 2 more displays wins. And then all in a day's work. In this scenario, the planets still move around the sun, but remain throughout the game right where they started. Victory conditions aren't changed from the basic game. Or leader, who's got the leader? There's only 1 victory condition. You win by controlling the majority of the leader characters in game when Earth returns to its starting space zone. And then pick a unit, any unit. Starting forces are entirely up to you. And then components. For the playing pieces, you can place them 1 at a time. Leaderless factions. Start the game without any leaders. You acquire a leader by controlling the planet associated with a particular leader. And then genie abilities. For Mercurian, they add 1 to all combat die rolls. Venusian genies. Anybody attacking a Venusian genie has 1 to his hit numbers. Earth genies. On Earth, genies can be produced at an alarming rate, 3 per turn, rather than the ordinary genie rate of 2 per turn. Lunar genies. Lunar genies to attack units in space. A die roll of 8 or higher hits any type of unit in the near lunar orbit zone. Martian genies. Martian genies are sneaky, moving up to 2 territorial zones per turn, building through front of the uncontrolled zones. Asteroid genies. These genies can travel short distances through space. They can move from the surface of the asteroid upon which they produce to the orbit zone of that asteroid. Varying movement speed for ground units. Troopers can move up to 2 zones per turn. Genies never move more than 1. Unit conversion. You can convert some units into other types of units. Transport hopping. Troopers and factories can jump from one transport to another in a single turn. If a transport ends its move in the same zone as the second transport which hasn't moved in that turn. And the slingshot effect. To slingshot, a ship must maneuver very close to the planet or to the sun, using energy gained by flying deep in the gravity well to shoot the ship further along its course. Only Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and the Sun can be used for slingshot moves. To slingshot, a ship or group of ships moves onto the space zone occupied by a planet marker or the sun zone in the center of the solar system display. The ship must be able to reach the zone in its normal move. When the ship reaches the planet marker, the player rolls 1 die. On a roll of 1 through 9, the slingshot attempt succeeds, and the ship or group of ships moves 2 extra zones. On a roll of 10, the angle of approach was wrong, and the ship crashes on the planet's surface and is destroyed. Slingshot around the sun offers even greater speed, but at a correspondingly greater risk. The player rolls 1 die. On a roll of 1 through 7, the attempt succeeds, and the ship or group of ships moves 4 extra zones. Combat. Subverting leaders. When a leader character is the last of his faction in his zone, an opposing player can try to brainwash him or her. If the subversion attempt succeeds, the leader comes over to the opposing player's side. Then defensive bonus and factories. All attacks against troopers and genies in zones containing factories require a number 1 greater than the list in combat results table. A roll of 10 always hits, however. And then building, unit placement. During opening setup, you place units in any zone you control. Factories in space. Ordinarily, factories on board transports can produce new units. This optional rule allows them to produce 1 fighter per turn. Free factories. The first player to take control of the planetary display gets free factory. Showing setup here. So they each get 6 territory cards, and so Buck Rogers will be blue, Oma Daring will be yellow, Killer Kane will be burgundy, Ardell will be green, Black Barney will be purple, and Doc Hoyer will be brown. So they place on their 6 cards they get, their 6 territorial cards, and each one they can have a maximum of 6 units, and they each have to distribute 8 troopers, 4 fighters, 2 factories, 2 genies, and 1 transport. So Buck Rogers has Hilo, he's got 3 fighters, and a control marker, Aristide, control marker, Asteroid Vesta, control marker, Asteroid Pallas, control marker, the L4 colony, control marker, fighter, 4 troops, and a factory, and the Eurasian Regency, where he has 4 troops, factoring the control marker, and himself, the leader. So in Aristide, he'll put his remaining 3 units, putting 3 at a time. He'll put 2 troops and transport. Uma Daring has Elysium, where she has 2 troops, transport control marker Hygeia, control marker the Warrens on Mercury. On Tranquility Base, a troop, 4 fighters, factoring control marker. On Tycho, herself, the leader, 2 troops, 2 genies, factoring control marker. So then she'll put her remaining 3 on Elysium, put 3 troops there. So I'm not showing the previous placements, just this last one. Killer Kane, he's got a control marker on Psycho, a control marker factory, troop, 4 fighters on Thule. He's got a control marker on the L5 colony. On Mars, on the Corporate Chasm, he has 2 troops, 2 genies, himself as the leader of factory and a control marker. On Mars, in the Ram HQ, he's got 2 troops, transport, control marker. And then he'll put his remaining 3 units on the Ram HQ on Mars. Ardella is green. She has Tolstoy, where she has 3 fighters, control marker. On Venus, the Lowlanders, 4 troops, fighter, factory, control marker. On Venus, herself, the leader. On Aphrodite, factory, control marker, 2 troops, 2 genies, control marker on Ceres. And on Mars, a control marker on Arcadia. And then she'll put her remaining 2 troops in transport on the Antarctic testing zone on Earth. 2 troops in transport. Black Barney, purple, has control marker on Maxwell and Venus, control marker on Aurora, control marker on urban reservations on Earth. On Mars, where most of his forces are. On Pavanas, he has 2 genies, 4 troops, a control marker. On the space elevator, he has himself the leader, 4 fighters, control marker in a factory. And on Mars Moon Deimos, trooper, transport, factory, control marker. And then he'll put his remaining 3 troops on Deimos. And lastly, Doc Hoyer, brown. He's got a control marker in the African Regency, control marker on Earth, control marker on Moscovians, on the moon. On the asteroids, on Fortuna, he's got a control marker, factory, transport, 4 troops. On Mariposas, he's got a control marker, himself as leader, troop. Subco Plains, he has 2 genies, 3 fighters, control marker, and a factory. And then his remaining 3 units, he'll put with his leader, fighter, and troop on Mariposas. And the planets are all, and asteroids are placed on their initial positions around the sun, day side facing up. Start on the first turn here. So I'm going to have play it as 6 players, so they'll all be individuals. First of all, you move all the planets counterclockwise. And I'm using the advanced game rules, so we do the turn order cards here. Randomly see who goes when. One goes 3, one will go second, and this 5th. It's a turn, so Doc Hoyer goes first. He'll move a couple troops over here to Bach. Move 2 troops and a genie over here. Send a fighter. Send 3 fighters to Tolstoy. So the last move Doc Hoyer is going to do is to do some transporting. He wants to transport from the asteroid Fortuna to Vesta. So he's going to load the transport with 3 troops. He can move 3, so he goes 1, and then 2, 3. He's going to take 2 troops, so to indicate that, we'll set these off to the side. Put a couple of troops under him to indicate that. So he's just heading to Vesta to eventually. So since I'm doing the advanced game, the leader doesn't give you an automatic +2. You go by their abilities, and Doc Hoyer's ability is spaceships with Hoyer move 2 extra zones. So there's no value to him being there. So he'll stay back up where he was. So number 2 is Wilma Deering. Her advantage is fighters, battlers, and transports. Immune to pass through fire, retreat fire, and killer satellites. That's good. So she has some forces on Venus and on the moon. She'll move some forces here to gain control of this area since nobody's there. She wants to keep those forces there, but she does she can use her transport elsewhere. So she's going to start moving that where it can be more useful. You can move 3 in the advanced game. So 1, 2, and then 3. Then over in the moon, she wants to move a fighter here. Actually move a couple genies here to try to take over this area. And then she'll put a fighter over here by this factory. Kind of distribute her forces around here a little bit. Then we'll do Buck Rogers. So he's mainly in Earth, of course. He'll spread out here. So his advantage are fighters with Buck destroy any enemy unit in a roll of 4 or more. He'll move a force here. Force here. He'll move a fighter to where he is because that's an advantage for him. 1, 2. And then he also he wants to make use of this transport over here. So 1, 2, 3, and battle doesn't need to take place there. Gets control marker for the American Regency. Independent arcologies. Then I'll move the others. And then in order, Black Barney, Killer Kane, and Ardella went. So we have 3 fighters against 3 fighters. And then we look at the combat results table. So the control markers can attack as well. It's simultaneous, but we'll do the brown first. Fighter to fighter. So if you roll a number equal to or greater than the hit number, you win. So the fighter to fighter, brown, 9. He needed a 6, so he does. Let's indicate that. Another brown. Nope. Yep. So 2 fighters will be lost. But they also get to attack before they're lost. And then the fighters for Ardella's forces, 5. Nope. Nope. 10. So one of the fighters is lost. And the advanced game, you can also do the control markers as well. And they need a 9 or better. Nope. So remove those. Next round. 2 brown fighters. 1, nope. 2, nope. Green fighter. She, yes, gets with a 6. Control marker. Nope. Next round. Yep. No, so Doc Hoyer's forces do win that battle. And also Doc Hoyer has a fighter versus a control marker there. Fighters against control markers. He's a 3 or better. Yep. Control markers against fighters need a 9. Nope. So he's able to get that. He's also able to put a control marker there. And then, so it's 2 genies versus a control marker. And then she gains control of Rutgers, of Farside, and of Muscovites. So she's got control of the moon right now. Production. So genies are powerful, but they can't move off the world. But factory can build 2 per turn. So he's going to put 2 genies here to reinforce this world here. And over on the asteroids, he needs his forces to be kind of mobile, so he's going to build a couple troops there. And then Wilma Deering, her 2 factories are over here. She feels she can use killer satellites are useful, of course, but they take 2 turns to produce. She is going to build 1 killer satellite here, and she'll indicate that by turning it over. And I'll just, actually for purpose, I'll just set it on top of the production marker there to indicate that's in production. And she also wants some forces to reinforce, and she's going to build a genie. She'll build 2 genies, because that'll be her base of operations. So she put 2 genies there. And then Buck Rogers production. So his factories are here in the Eurasian Regency and the L4 colony. He also wants to reinforce his troops on Earth, so he'll build a couple more genies. She'll put here. And then the L4 colony. So he can build 1 fighter per turn. And he's going to do that because he has good bonuses using fighters. So to kind of build on his strengths there. And then we'll go into the next turn where after everybody else does all their production, you move the planets again. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense to play. So that's Buck Rogers' Battle for the 25th Century game from TSR in 1988. Very glad I have it. It's difficult to get. It's pretty expensive out there. The components, obviously, it's especially for the day, getting miniatures, and so many miniatures, and well done. They're well molded plastic. Really convey the theme. It's got the planetary movement, you got production, you have different types of units, and the leaders have different abilities in the advanced game. It's got a little bit of depth to it. I was pleasantly surprised. I imagine when you get a high number of players going, you can do like various diplomacy, that sort of thing to make it more interesting. But it's a good game. And it's got several optional rules to make it even more interesting. I definitely recommend it. I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Thanks a lot.